Thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. My name is Jose Caso, and I'm LANSA's product marketing manager. For today's presentation, we have taken your IBM I to the web, mobile, and beyond. Today I'm with Eugene King. He's the senior engineer of LANSA. He has been over 20 years at LANSA, involved in a lot of big projects all over the world. So without further situation, I'm going back. I'm going to continue with the topic. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about the business challenges and the solutions that companies that have invested a lot of their in IT in their IBM I space. We're going to talk about some features and why Axis would be a good idea for your information, for your company. So why we're still using terminal emulators? So during the early 80s, interactive terminals such as the IBM I 5250 became a great leap forward. They may look old to today's standards, but it represented a major revolution in computing because until that time, you weren't able to have real-time access to your data and applications. What these terminals really gave us is the opportunity to enter data and get results back in real time. But by the time the PC revolution came around and people wanted to use those very, very powerful machines that they have in their desktops to take the advantage of the capabilities of their mainframe systems and to use the data in a personalized way. So a terminal emulator is a computer program that emulates video terminal within other display architecture. Display it in other ways. We're using a PC to make things the way the mainframe did, or in this case, the mid-range, such as the IBM I. So we ended up now with a client-server personal computing machine where we could get data from our machine and get it down to our systems. But we needed a way to still get that terminal session because there are so many applications remaining in that were terminal based. So then the web revolution arrived. At first, simple static websites were created, but as the technological stack evolved, web applications became a reality. Starting in the 2000s, there was a fever to get everything to the web. And really, right now, it's really difficult to hear about traditional client-server applications being launched into a market where real-time graphic-intensive high-performance computing is not required. So the on-demand economy is putting a lot of pressure in a lot of businesses to be responsive to the market needs. We have seen huge century-old corporations such as Sears that didn't adapt it fast enough to change and are being threatened by nimble, cost-effective, and organizations that are that have full up-to-date technology, such as Amazon. Also, businesses, time to market is a critical factor. Building applications from a clean slate is a big no for companies who have invested years and years in technology, having baked into their software their competitive advantage. A rip and replace option is simply not an option. And last but definitely not least, labor has been a rampant pressure in the last 2 years due to the pandemic. Being able to respond fast to the increasing challenges has put a pressure to remain competitive in markets that are full of new players. These guys have a lot of technology. All their technology is based in the 2000s, and remaining competitive, it is one of the most difficult tasks for companies that have legacy applications in place and have not find the ways to modernize it. So in reality, platform challenges in today's businesses with yesterday's technologies are incredible. You know, everyone wants to offer a modern user experience, so it can be easy for everyone to just pick up an information system in a more intuitive way. And we all want to go to the web and support newer devices. So when you see some of the challenges of the business users is that they're looking for enhanced and intuitive interface similar to the web applications they interact normally. 50 to 50, scared to death today's generation, and for good reason. They never interacted with them before. I can hardly remember the first time. We all started off with a green screen, but nowadays it's simply not so simple. So green screen modernization simplify how they access the solutions, and so no installation is required in a PC. So, and what is IT looking for? Fast time to market, from setup to configuration to deployment to user training. They really don't want to dwell on dealing with all those pains. And minimal risk and cost effective. It's something that, as you can see in the last block, they really don't want to break the bank in order to get a solution that allows them to go, that allow take their legacy applications to the web. They're also looking for a highly configurable solution without breaking the bank, and of course that it's highly scalable. So one of the biggest challenges and pains that a lot of customers have come to LANSA is talking about the many pains about deploying and updating software in every device, getting them certified each and every time for every application and for every use case. It might seem a simple task, but in reality, it is far from it. So that is when they want, to forget about concurrent and per seat licensing as well. There are a lot of solutions out in the market with so many price ranges, but if there's a way to tackle all of them, that'll be something that would be very impactful. So LANSA, 20 years ago, LANSA acquired a company called Axis, and we developed to create a far more evolved solution to modernizing IBM applications. So if we really get into what differs between a terminal emulation and a web enablement solution, modernization solution such as Axis, you can see that it allows you to go to web enable those applications at a lower price in a secure way of exposing your application to the web. you can really improve the look and feel and general usability of the applications. You don't require the source code or making changes to the source code at any time. It does not require to install applications in the client, and simply forget about installing terminal emulations in different devices, certifying terminal emulator with different devices, or forget about paying licenses. It simply does not require that. So imagine that you would have to pay a per seat terminal solution. It is really expensive to not just to buy those licenses, but to deploy them, and the lengthy process of the certification time. And if we really, of course, there are terminal emulation solutions that are web-based, and they may seem a very good idea, but imagine if you want to have a third party get involved with your information system, such as a supplier, and they would need to understand and get trained in the platform in order to get to use it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the modernization journey that our customers face, and some of the common strategies out there. You'll see that the ROI scales greatly as you move through your modernization journey, from a quick tactical wins to more strategic options, going from left to right. The first option is the instant GUI. Screen scraping is a quick win, but the ROI is low because you are not adding a lot of value other than a better presentation. Next, we can enhance those reface screens for a better navigation, controls, integration with Word, Excel, and other apps. The ROI will rise as you continue to equip users with more functionality and less clutter. At this moment, we're going to focus only on the instant GUI and the enhanced UI, that it's more appealing to the topic we're trying to cover today. But we're also going to talk about going mobile, that is stressing a lot of organizations. And what about third-party integration? Imagine generating PDFs or launching Google Maps. I'm talking about true application. And then after, we're going to focus and later on about these two other blocks. So as you can see here in this, so we can use Access to integrate with other applications right out of that using something we call RAMP. And this allows us to continue evolving our conversation. So, but right now we're going to focus just in the instant GUI. So Access enables you to transform your 50 to 50 screens into a modern web application instantly. And instead of undergoing weeks and weeks of deployment, you can do it in a matter of hours. And without changing a single line of code, just install it and go, nothing more. Also, Access doesn't need the source code. It uses 50 to 50 data stream. So that package you bought 19 years ago and it didn't come with the source code, well, you can get modernized too. And Access has a dynamic architecture, which means applications changes can be reflected immediately without any action on your part or eliminating double maintenance. So now we are going to talk about how to enhance your unified interface. Access includes a global rules engine, which allows you to quickly update and enrich the user experience for all the applications without changing the default recognition rules. In addition, you can enhance and alter or hide content on the screens using some UI controls listed below. Now, not all refacing tools are the same. Some require HTML and CSS skills to make modifications. Access is none of those. No HTML and CSS skills are required with Access. Also, Access enables you to manage spool files and output queues from your browser. You can view, print, download, and delete reports from your computer or tablet device and save them as PDFs and Excel files. So at this moment, I'm going to introduce Eugene. Eugene is our senior sales engineer at LANSA. And so over to you, Eugene.
Thank you, Jose. So this is the demonstration portion of the webinar. And during this demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the stages of the modernization with Axes. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to show you how we do the customization of the screens by adding a global rule for a visualization and also doing some on-screen customizations for that. And to start that process, I'm going to start looking at a standard terminal. So this is the application that we're going to be looking at. So let me just sign myself in like this. And it's just to show you the screens that we're going to be working with when we're working through the Axes modernization. So here's our typical menus. There's option 1. I'm going to work with customers, and that then gives me a subfile with a position 2. I can then tab the company that I want to view. I can view the details. There's a pop-up screen, so there's a prompter if I want to do a prompter there. F12 to go back, and if I want to look at something else, we can go look at the address information and so on and so forth. So these are the screens that we're going to be looking at modernizing, and I'm going to start that journey by doing an initial install of Axes. So right now, today, you can go onto our Axes Live website, download Axes and install it on your IBM I and be up and running within 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, so this is what I'm going to show you now is the default rendering of the screen. So this is out of the box, no customization of the application at all. So this is running on the exact same IBM I that I showed you from the terminal session. I got my display program message, press enter. You'll now see that all the function keys that were at the bottom of the screen are now clickable keys. The menu items are now all hyperlinked. So when I select demonstrations, I go through to LANSA Tool Company and go to work with customers, we can see the exact same subfile, and it works in the exact same way. Remember, I haven't done any changes to this. This is out of the box as is. And this is what it would look like. So if I then do an F4 on my pop-up screen, and this is our default rendering of the pop-up screen. Go F12, and again, should highlight that the subfile options that appear at the top, I can either manually type them in, or if I place my cursor in the actual select button and press the left-hand key on my mouse, I can then go in and these subfile options have been automatically identified, and it gives me the address information. Okay, so I can then go in and do the address information. So I can view the different subfile options now just by simply going in and clicking on the one that I want to actually see and selecting the option accordingly. Okay, the subfile controls. So this is the subfile that you see here. I can page up and page down using these function keys here. It automatically identified that there's a subfile control on there, and it's put them as function keys. So this is the default rendering. So the next stage, and Jose mentioned this, is that we can set up a set of global rules. So we don't have to go in and make changes to individual screens. What we can do is we can create a set of rules which we can then determine how things are shown on the screen. So as you can see here, I've changed the way that the application behaves already by giving you a custom login page. I can sign in the exact same way. And now, rather than being left justified, what I've done is I've actually centralized the whole process. So now I've got some space on either side, and I've just put in a dark background on that. I've removed the title bar, and I've also put in a logo up in the top right-hand corner. And that's part of the global rules. And I'll show you how we add those later. Press enter. And again, all I've done here is add a slightly different style. So we can define styles. We have a WYSIWYG tool that allows you to define a style, and then you can apply that style. So in this case, my buttons are appearing as blue. My menu option select is now just a simple arrow, and my menu options are now in a blue color. I can drill down in the exact same way that I did previously and go into work with customers. Now you'll notice everything's changed a little bit here. So I've changed my position to and my options to appear more like a web-enabled input field. Yep, so I've got rid of the box. I've just given it a slightly gray background so you can see that. And I can go in and we can show the details. I've changed the colors of the subfile entries so that they're slightly gray. And again, I've hidden the subfile options because now we don't need to see the subfile options. So they've been hidden for me. I do a right click and I can see the details. So the important difference here on the detail screen now is I've added a global rule that says wherever you see the discount code, I want to see a drop down. I'm going to show you exactly how we add that when we get onto the demonstration portion, when I get onto the development portion of the demonstration. I've also created this as a hyperlink. So now this will link automatically to our Axes Live website. Okay, and again, that has been set up on a global level. Okay, let's just see one of the other fields, and you can see the details here as well. This is another example. So build state is a drop down. Again, that is built at a global level. I've not gone into each of these screens and made the changes. All I've done is said wherever you see state, I want a drop down. If you see bill ship, I want a checkbox. And I'll take you through the process for that in a second. So that is using global rules. At no point have I made any customization on the individual screens. Now, it may come to a point where you want to add value. And what we would do there is we'd be looking at 20% of the screens. The general rule is users will spend 80% of their time in 20% of the screens. And it's those 20% of this that we'll look at and we'll look to add value. So what I'm going to show you next is when you can start customizing individual screens. So this is, let me close that one down. We don't need that now. So now this is a fully customized application. So I'm just going to log into this. Here's my program message break. So I've got that now appearing as a little pop-up, and I've changed the way that my menu looks. So this, instead of having a simple menu, I now have a contact card style interface. So I've gone from this type of interface to this type of interface to make it more web and look more like a web application, but behind it is still my 5250 system. Also with Axes, we have what we call a choreographer. So I can record keystrokes and then play those keystrokes back. So rather than going through the menu systems to get to my work with customers now, I have an additional option here that if I select it, it'll go through all the different menus and actually go straight to where I want to go. So if you've got common tasks that you do on a regular basis, you can create those sort of shortcuts, and it makes it very simple then to get to that point where you want to do work. And you'll notice a big difference on this screen as well. So on this screen, I've added more customization. So I've changed the subfiles. So no longer do we have a simple list. What we have is a contact card style. My subfile controls are now forwards and back. Excuse me. I've got my forward and back buttons down here. I've hidden the function keys because I don't want them to see the function keys in this case, because I can control exactly where they're going to go. They can add a customer. And again, you'll see examples of global rules on this screen as well. So I've not tailored this screen at all. It's all global rules, including these drop downs. That's using the exact same rule that we saw previously. And the check buttons and radio buttons, and also the no discount drop down that we've got there. I can do F12 to that. Now the subfile options, you'll notice there's no subfile select that we've got there. I've replaced it. In fact, it's a visualization over the select field that was on the screen. And I've just added an image to it that still, if I click it, I now get the subfile options from that point. So it no longer just looks like an input field. It looks like more information. I can go into details. And this is the first screen where we're really adding some value. So we've got our simple controls that we showed you previously, the drop downs and the hyperlinks. But you'll notice the big difference being this control over on the right-hand side. We've got order history and we have top 10 customers. And this is information picked directly up from the IBM I and shown on the screen. And if I go back and we go and see, let's go Anglo-American Enterprises and see those instead, we'll have a different set of orders. So these are dynamically created. I have the ability to download to Excel, to a CSV file, or even do a PDF based on what is current in that actual list. So that's now opened up a PDF document with the list. Now this is a fairly simple example, and I'll show you how we build that when we get to show you how to do the development. We've got the search criteria, and we've got our additional pages. So we've added value to that screen. So that's an individual screen that I've customized to add some value to that. Likewise with the address information. Again, standard. All I've done here is adjusted the field slightly to the left and added a Google Map control showing the billing and the shipping address. And if we look at orders here, you'll notice I've added a little bit of control here. So this wasn't on the original application. What I do here, if I've got some script here that says, right, if the value is over 50,000, paint it in green. If it's under 2,000, paint it in red. Again, I'm adding value so I can visually see the low numbers and the high numbers. So it gives impact as soon as I see that, that screen. I'll go backwards. Okay. So that's the sort of customizations you can actually do, but how do you do that? For this part, I'm going to go to a pre-prepared section. So I'm just going to sign into this one here because this is the one we're going to be working with and we're going to be doing some customizations for. So I'm going to go into our demonstrations again, LANSA tool company, and work with customers. Specifically, what we want to do is if we go into the details screen, I want to add a drop down. So you see here that we don't have a drop down control. I want to add a drop down control. I want to add the data table as well so that we can see the order history for that specific customer. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to open up our development console. So once again, I don't need to install anything on my PC. This is all running off my IBM I. So yeah, there's nothing for me to actually install. I'm on the home page. I'm going to go into my developers tools and we break up areas into projects. Each one of these projects, as you saw, each stage that I showed you previously was actually an individual project. So this is the way that we can keep those views, those skins, if you will, over the application separately. So I'm going to open up this one because this is the one we last looked at and the one I want to make some changes to. And I'm going to work as a TS2 developer. So this will now open up my WYSIWYG editor. So this is my development tool. I'm going to log in. I'm going to navigate to the screen that I want to do some editing on. Now, initially, I want to add a global rule. So I want it to apply to everywhere where you see the discount code. So whether it's on the details screen Or if I press the F6 key on this screen, on whether it's on the add new customer screen, you'll see that we've got the discount code as well there. So rather than going to each individual screen to do that change, I'm going to do it at a global level. I'm going to go over to my left-hand side, select from the menu and go to Auto GUI. So these are a set of rules which we can use to determine how the application behaves and how things are actually recognized. So for example, function keys, we can have them appearing on the left, right, top or bottom. How do you want them to be visualized? Raised and elevated text. Do you want the text only or do you want the function key number as well? So F3 equals exit, F12 equals cancel. You can have that. It's up to you how that's configured, but that's configured at a global level, similar to the way that subfiles are recognized. But for this validation, for this rule, for the details, for that discount, I go to this option here. Now you'll notice I've got several rules already identified. Okay, so menu items, function keys, for dates. Okay, we could control the way that dates are shown. But the one I'm interested in is at the bottom, and this is a drop down. I've already got it defined, I just don't have it activated. So I can turn these on and off as I wish. So here we've got the discount code, and we have different forms that it can be applied to. Okay, so in this case, we're making it a drop down box, but we may want it a date or a checkbox, or even a push button, or even raw HTML. For example, the logo that you see is an example of using raw HTML to actually do that. But we're doing the drop down. The next thing we want to do is to identify it. So how do we identify this? So on the left-hand side, anything that contains the value discount. Now, this is a fairly simple example. You can use regular expressions inside here to do the identification of text as well. But this is a fairly simple example. But wherever you see discount, as in discount code, and it is output only, then the next field that you see, if it's input, that is going to be my drop down. So this where it says 10% will be my drop down. Okay to that. Now I need to edit the properties. So what are the properties for this? Well, actually, it's a drop down, and I'm going to have a static table. So what exactly is a static table? Well, in this case, the static table is called discount codes. So within Axes, if I go back to the home page, you'll see that we've got two types of tables, static and dynamic. Static tables, like the discount code, are built at the start of the session. So as soon as you sign on, you will get, it will build the drop down for the discount code based, and you can see this one here, this one that I'm highlighting there, based on this SQL. Now, this is a fairly simple SQL. You can have complex SQLs there doing joins, whatever you wish for that. This is fairly simple. It's just receiving the discount code and the description from the file LTC disk in the library SLS LTC data. Returning those values into the value and the text. Now that will happen at the start of the actual session. And that's all I need to do. So specify that it's a static table and that we've got discount codes. Say okay to that, turn that on, and then say okay. And all I need to do is press the save button. Just do a quick sign in. And now everywhere you've got the discount code, F6, you'll now have your drop down available. Okay, so that's a global rule, and that will be applied across all the screens. But I want to add value to this screen. I want to be able to add a order history, a list of all the orders that I have previously. Okay, so now I need to edit the screen. So I'm going to go into edit screen mode. Now, part of this process is that I need to pull data from the actual screen itself. So in particular, this value here. So I need to give that value a name, an internal variable name. And to do that, I just go onto my screen. If I highlight that again, you'll notice down here that one's been highlighted in amber. I'm just going to call this one customer ID. Okay. And I would do that for any field that I want to retrieve information from with axes. I would actually give it a particular name. For example, if I wanted to do that one, I could call that one customer name and so on and so forth. But that's all I'm going to do for that. And I'll just save that quickly. Okay. Now that I've named that, let's start adding my data table here. So I go again to the left and I go to extensions. You'll notice now that I've got a menu on the right-hand side, which is my extensions toolbox. And this contains all the different controls and visualizations that I need to do my development. Now, for this particular example, I'm actually going to use a tab sheet, mainly because I like the look of the tab sheet when it's rendered on the screen. And I can then just resize that to fit like that. I'm going to add a tab to it. I'm going to call that tab order history. Give it an icon of history and then just say OK. So that's now created my tab sheet. In this case, it's only got one tab, and that is my order history. Now, in that tab, I'm going to have a data table. Again, so I'm just going to scroll up, find my data table. And again, if you want help on the data table, you just press the little question icon and it'll give you details about how to use it. I'm just going to drag it onto my table, onto my tab sheet, and then just give it a quick resize to fit in there. Okay. Right. So now that I've got the data table, now I need to tell it where it's going to be getting the data from. So if we just scroll down, we have a number of properties for this data table. I'm going to have paging on. I want the ability to search. I'm going to change the length. So let's change the length of that. No, not that one. That's not the one I want to use. I want to show the info, which is the page information. And I'm going to change the length. So I'm just going to have 6 entries per page. That is doing there. Okay, it's just saying I want 6 entries. For the data source, I'm going to have a dynamic table. Now, dynamic tables differ than static tables in that they are populated when the page is refreshed or for an action that you do on the page. A prime example would be drop downs for the make of a car, for example, Ford or Chrysler, and then that would determine what would appear in the model. So the make of the car could be a static table, because that wouldn't change much, but the model of the car would actually be a dynamic table, a dynamic query, mainly because it would depend on what you chose from the model, and it works the same way. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be a dynamic table. Now, if we go back to the home page, and let's have a look at our dynamic tables here. Now, there's no difference really between the two. Yeah, here's my dynamic table, and the one I'm actually looking for, I've already got it defined here for this particular demo. You'll notice that we've got a dynamic table, order history, use QL, and here we've got LTC order number and the order total. Again, from the library and the table, but this time we're actually passing in a variable, and that variable is the SQL variable customer. Okay, and we're returning the values order number and order total into that. So I've got that defined already. So we're going to use that order history. So I'm going to go back to my page. Where are we? Go back to my page here and say that the table name is order history. But there's one more thing that we need to do. We're going to pass it an SQL variable. So we need to tell it what the value is that's actually in that field. So I need to copy or to retrieve that value. And I do that if I go down to this SQL variable here, I go into edit. And I'm just going to replace that with this code here. So all we're doing here is defining a variable called EID. Yep, let's get rid of that. EID. And that field that will be the customer ID. Okay, so it's the fields called customer ID. We then get the value and put it in the SQL variable customer. And that's it. And I say OK to that. I can save that. Now, if I've done everything right and I exit, we'll now see the data table. I'll need to do some sizing on that. I've done that a little bit too big, so I can quickly go back in. I can resize that. I can give this a little bit more room, like that. Give it that a little bit more room as well. You know, just adjust it to my heart's content. Do a save, exit, and we now have our data table. It's linked directly to the actual customer that we select. So again, go into the details and we can see the data table there. And I can even search in there if I need to. And all that functionality I showed you previously is already built into there. So I can download it to Excel, CSV, PDF, and I can also print it from there. With the Axes product, you know, I've taken you through how we can just have a green on black application very quickly after you've installed Axes, have web enablement. Yep, you can access it over the web, and you've seen the controls, the default functions, and how we can hyperlink the menu options. And then with some work adding global rules, we can make that a little bit better. We can add visualizations like checkboxes and date pickers and drop downs. And then we can go down and we can enhance it even further, and we can add additional information like the Google Maps, like the data table I showed you, or Google Charts. And it's very quick and easy to do. Now, with traditional refacing tools, really that's as far as it would actually go. You don't do any changes to the core system. You can make the screen look better, you can enhance the controls, you can add functionality to it, you can download data to Excel or create PDFs quite easily with those. But what happens if you want to change the behavior of your application? Well, you can't, not really. But with LANSA, this is the first stage. This is only the first stage. Yeah. So Axes can take you so far, and then after that, you can reuse whatever you've done inside Axes inside the LANSA environment. And Jose will take you through a little bit more details in a second. But what it enables you to do, now these that you see here, whether it's a desktop, a laptop, a mobile, or a tablet, you can reuse that 5250 functionality inside a modern application. And Jose mentioned RAMP, that stands for Rapid Application Modernization Process, but simply put, it allows you to use those Axes screens in a modern web application. And you combine that with something like LANSA Mobile, Axes Mobile, which allows you to run your 5250s in a mobile device. But it gives you that modern look feel. So really, Axes is not the end of the journey, but the beginning. And at this point, I will hand over to Jose.
Thank you, Eugene. So I was, as Eugene mentioned, you know, Axis is a great tool that allows you to take those big, nice applications, 50 to 50 applications that you have invested a lot of money. You have baked in your competitive advantage there. But what if you really want to take the next step? What would it take you to get there? So as we were mentioning about this journey, mobile is the first category where there's an overlap between Axis and Visual LANSA. A natural question is, when do you use which product? Well, you use Axis when you need to quickly put an existing IBM app in the hands of your mobile users to make them available at any time from anywhere. And you can use Visual LANSA when your 50-50 screens don't lend themselves to mobile. That is an overwhelming large screen that perhaps it'll need some kind of development. So instead of quickly build new purpose-built applications with Visual LANSA, which will run natively in your IBM I and have real-time access to your DB2, to your APIs, to your data queues, to your data areas. So regardless of which tool you decide, your new mobile application can access all the native devices features that will make your users more productive and accurate. Things that GPS localization services, barcode scanning, capturing photos and videos and recording audio, just to name a few. So moving into integration, how can you enable your existing 50-50 applications to better coexist with your other systems? So with Axis, we have host integration services. For example, let's say you're a Salesforce customer and your users need to use your ERP data from within a cloud-based Salesforce app because they're tired of alt-tabbing between multiple screens. And I guess nobody loves that in this day and age. So with host integration services, you can embed Axis Session in Salesforce and let Salesforce communicate to Axis and tell you what to do, like the customer ID, an order number from a Salesforce record, and then navigate through your ERP to reach the order details screen. So right now we're going to talk as a second example. It's similar to the previous one, but this doesn't use Axis to display the screen, but rather navigate the 50-50 screen application to batch. Say, grab a piece of information from the screen, complete a transaction. Imagine that you have an application that calculates a user-specific price, but that code is not in a callable API. So Axis Host Integration Services, a third-party application, would navigate to that screen where the price is displayed, capture the price from the green screen, and return the calling application. So with Visual LANSA, you're open up to a new world of possibilities with RESTful services, web services, and all those kind of things that right now in the modern economy, in the modern API economy, they are everywhere. So with Visual LANSA, you can really integrate with everything that has an actual API, and you can do whatever you want and without the limitations that you would have in your 50-50 screen. So when we're talking about new application development, then I guess one of our best solution is use a solution such as Visual LANSA. It's a low-code development environment where you can use multiple interfaces, databases, and platforms. And of course, you can deploy it in the cloud. But something that is very important that, and I guess Eugene just mentioned it, is you can leverage all your ramp with ramp. You can leverage your 50-50 applications just by snapping them in and acquiring. So there's no need to get those screens available as APIs in order to consume them. You can simply use ramp and access those applications with not a lot of problems. You know, it's going to be something quite streamlined. So that ends up today's conversation. So in the lower of your screen, in the taskbar of your screen, you'll find an option called Q&A. If you can please share us some questions that we would like us to answer, we will be more than happy. And the same thing is if you have any other question after the webinar, please shoot us an email and we will be glad to answer. So I saw some questions actually in our chat box. I'm going to bring them up. So one of the first question was, can the web pages be served via HTTPS as well as HTTP? And if so, what needs to be done to set up this? Eugene, I think this is a question for you. Eugene?
Sorry, I was muted. I was talking away there. And so I apologize for that. The simple answer to that is yes, we can do HTTPS. You will need either a self-signed certificate or you will need one from a certified authority. In the Axis configuration files that are stored on the IFS, there are a number of settings that you can set up where you can stipulate the port. It's all in the documentation. So if you went onto our documents, I believe it's available website and search for SSL, you'll find how you can do that and the process of actually setting up HTTPS. So that yes, you can do that. And I've noticed you've also asked a second question. Is there anything that can be used to group configuration changes into various development environments, such as development, test, and production, and to move changes between these environments? Again, the answer is yes. So as part of the demo, you saw that I was using a project. A project essentially equates to a directory on the IFS. So I could have 3 or 4 different projects, one for test, one for development, one for user acceptance, and one for production. Yeah, and I could store them in separate directories. And then if it's on the same IBM I can just do a copy obj to copy between the 2 directories. So if I make a change in development, I can move it to the test, and then from test to user acceptance, from user acceptance to production. Yeah, I just use the copy obj command. Again, it's documented in Axis documentation. If I'm putting it to a different IBM I or a different LPAR, then I can just do a savobj and save those directories and just and then just restore those directories to the target system. And again, it's fully, we've got full instructions in there on that whole process for that.
Great, Eugene. I guess we have another question for you. What level of operating system is needed to support RAMP and the features demonstrated today?
So I believe, and you may need to correct me if I'm wrong here, I think it's 7.2 and above for the latest release of Axis.
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, it is.
Yeah. So
only supported versions, only supported
yes.
versions from IBM.
Yes.
Can we deploy Axis using AWS pipeline?
Ooh, this all resides on your IBM I. Well, this is software which sits on your IBM I. AWS, I don't think you'd be able to do that. It depends if you're using AWS as just a straightforward web server. If it's just a web server that's connected to your back end, then I can't see any reason why you couldn't do that and just treat it in that way. So we have a deployment model B. So essentially that's a proxy server. So I don't know if that was what you were thinking about or if it was something different.
Okay, there's another question and I guess this one's for me. Is this I was mentioning why is it more cost effective to go with Axis rather with a web enablement modernization solution such as Axis versus versus a terminal emulator. And there are many reasons. There are some direct costs involved. That's the licensing. And the indirect cost would be managing all those devices. There are many situations in which, for instance, you will have to pay for for those licenses. You will have to manage the volume licensing of those licenses. You will have to certify to make sure you're certifying the products. And I believe there's another indirect cost that I didn't mention actually when I was talking about it, and it's bring your own device. What happens when somebody brings in their own device, or even a vendor that are using terminal emulation in a different device, and it would somehow need to be certified? So I really hope that that answered your question.
But I can actually add to that one, Jose, because we had a customer over in the UK. So this was just before the start of the pandemic, and everybody was asked to start working from home. Over 100 users using terminal services in a terminal emulator inside their offices. But when they were then forced to work from home, what they didn't want to do is install terminal emulators on 500 machines. So they went ahead and purchased Axes so that they could then just access it from a normal browser from their home PCs, rather than having to do the install and maintain all those different machines.
No, that's a very good answer. And I guess we have seen a lot of similar examples of businesses that are requiring this kind of solutions in this moment. So I have no other questions. I see no other questions here. So I guess this concludes today's webinar. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and be with us today. So thank you. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you, Eugene. Your demonstration was an amazing demonstration of the capabilities of Axis.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.